I call this meeting of HR Finance to order on Tuesday, January 11th at 5:17. And we will start with the guest presentation. Jeff Anderson.
Good evening. It's wonderful to be here with everyone in this new building.
Right?
So in front of you, you should have a draft document that says Duluth Public Schools Legislative Platform. I'll go over that in a moment. First, I'd love to just give you a brief update on the upcoming legislative session, which is going to begin on January 31st. It's traditionally a bonding and policy year. Last year, the odd year in the legislative biennium, is a budget year, and so the legislature passed their two-year budget back in June in a special session. And so traditionally, this is the year they'd be tackling policy issues and bonding. It's also a redistricting year, which happens every 10 years, which is some would say a complicating factor to this particular session, and it's an election year. So there's a lot that's going to be influencing decisions that are made in St. Paul.
What was the last thing you said, Jeff? Sorry, redistricting and then
Election year. It's an election year. So though they passed a budget last year, there'll likely be a budget or budget bills and tax bills this year, based upon the fact that there is a $7+ billion budget surplus. If you talk to legislators who have been around a while, they will tell you that in dealing with surpluses and in dealing with deficits, they will usually say deficits are easier to deal with because the surpluses, it's a lot of money and there's a lot of people who have ideas on how they should spend that money. You've already seen some of those partisan ideas where leaders in the Republican caucus want to provide for some tax cuts, tax relief. There's leadership within the DFL caucus who want to look at some new or increased funding for programs. And so you'll see that fight emerge at the legislature. So in talking about the factors that will influence what happens, I mentioned redistricting. So every 10 years, based upon the census, all of the lines in the state of Minnesota have to be redrawn, the congressional districts, the state Senate and state House districts. That process has been underway for the last year. The Democrats bring forward a proposal, and then the Republicans bring forward a proposal. In a legislative body that would be controlled all by one party with a governor of the same party, like many states have, those proposals are easier to pass. They pass, they're signed into law, you have your new lines. And there's many states right now that have those lines in place. Minnesota is one of very few states that has a divided form of government where we have Republicans controlling the Senate, Democrats controlling the House and the governor's office. And so there's early consensus that no one is going to agree on what those maps should look like. And when that happens, that defaults then to the judicial branch. So there's a panel of judges that have been appointed that have held hearings around the state of Minnesota. And on February 15th, if the legislature fails to enact maps, which they likely will, the legislative panel will release their maps. And those are the maps that will become the new legislative districts. And so on February 16th, you're going to see legislators looking for new homes or apartments because they are all of a sudden not in the district they represent, and they will want to move. You're going to see legislators who are pitted against one another, who may be of the same party or different parties, who have been redistricted together. You'll see more retirements likely. Traditionally, that's what happens in these redistricting years. So that is another factor in what we might be seeing at the legislature this session. And then I talked about bonding. So it being a traditional bonding year, all signs and what has come from leaders in both the House and Senate is that there's an appetite for a bonding bill at least the same size as the bonding bill that was passed in 2020. Doesn't necessarily impact schools because schools, districts cannot apply for state bonding. But cities and counties and different municipalities can. So you'll see cities like Duluth and Hermantown and surrounding communities all seeking those bond funds for various projects, and that will be part of this legislative process. So as it comes back to education and looking at legislative priorities, one of the
Jeff, can I ask a quick question
yes.
about the boundaries
Yep.
and the redistricting? Have we seen that in northeastern Minnesota that we have a loss of population or a gain in population that's going to potentially affect specifically our regional delegation?
So there is each district, whether it's a House district, Senate district, or congressional district, there are goal numbers that the judges or legislators who draw these maps have to get to. And it's no secret that northeastern Minnesota has not gained population like the metro areas have. So there likely will be the addition of seats or in the metro areas. And what you'll see most likely, I would predict, in northern Minnesota is not necessarily the loss of seats, but the districts are going to get larger, geographically larger. I think, for instance, Senator McEwen, state senator in Duluth, her district has to pick up something like 5,000 people, and so her district is going to have to grow. Right now, she shares some of that district. Senator Bach's district comes down into Duluth, into some of Duluth, and I think he represents somewhere around 5,000 or 6,000 people in Duluth. So if you're a legislative panel, are you looking at that map going, does it just make sense to make the Duluth district all of Duluth? And so you'll see lines expand like that, where they have to pick up more population.
Thanks.
Is the judiciary maps like public information yet, or are they like quarantined until kind of thing?
They are not public yet.
Okay.
You can, if you Google redistricting state of Minnesota, the maps will all pop up that the House and Senate Republicans and House DFL have put out there. And they're interesting to look at just to see how these lines are shifting. But the judicial maps are close hold until February 15th. So that leaves the legislature with about 2 weeks in session, with folks not really knowing where they, what their district will look like. And I should have followed up by saying it is an election year, which means that if there's dramatic changes to your districts as a legislator, you're going to want to probably wrap up what you're doing in St. Paul as soon as possible so you can get back home to talk to constituents in your newly drawn district. So all of those are factors in this upcoming session. And related to that budget surplus, tying it back to legislative priorities and to education, there will be a push by, I think, all of the stakeholders in education to ask the legislature to invest some of that surplus into general fund education. And that's one of the things you'll see here on the legislative platform is state aid for public education funding has not kept up with inflation. To help Duluth Public Schools compete in the challenging labor market and meet student needs, we request that the state significantly increase and stabilize funding for Minnesota's local public education systems. We also support linking the basic education funding formula to annual increases to inflation. You'll see this whether it's School Boards Association, the Superintendents Association, administrators, Education Minnesota, all of these different stakeholders in education are really making that a legislative priority, asking the legislature to invest some of that additional money that the state has in public education. And so that is one of the priorities that we're proposing. Another is would directly benefit Duluth, and we've talked about this before, a sales tax exemption on construction materials. We had a standalone bill drafted last year for Duluth. Other districts had standalone bills, Ely, Rock Ridge, Hibbing. This year, we've combined all of those into one bill because rather than having all the different districts trying to go out and gain that support from legislators, we think we can tell a better story. In the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of these construction projects, it just makes sense to the state, which clearly has that surplus on the books, to allow these districts to invest back into their construction projects with the sales tax exemption. Now, if there's a tax bill, and again, there likely will be some modifications, then you'll likely see this being able to be attached if we can get the support we need. And I should say our local delegation has been very supportive of this effort, and we'll be introducing this on behalf of Duluth and those other districts. Special education is on here again. As you know, we have been trying to recoup some of that special education money that the district spent from its reserves. We've asked the state for this in the past 2 legislative sessions. I would say it took a backseat to our efforts regarding Historical Central and the special legislative authority that we sought out in that session. And so we think it's valuable to take another look at this and push again, especially at a time when the state has those budget surpluses, to say, can you help make the district whole again? It also calls for a continuation to freeze special education across subsidies in place for each school district and support a single special education formula that's stable and equitable and consistent. That language you'll see is consistent with some of the other priorities of other education stakeholders. You can see compensatory revenue, our operating levies, and the reduction of mandates. These are and can be a starting point if there are other items of importance to board members and to the district that could be included in a legislative platform. We could make a list that's probably 10 feet long of all of the initiatives, but my recommendation is always to try to keep it shorter, because we are taking this to our legislators when they're asking what's important to the district that they represent. We'd like to provide them with a more concise list because we have a better chance of getting these things done rather than diluting it with a long, long list. But with that said, if there are other things that are important to the district and to the board and administration, we should certainly look at including those.
I'll just follow up with especially the special education component piece. While most of the items, but including the sales tax exemption, which is supporting Duluth specifically, legislators hear this 500 times from 500 representatives, and those are good things to just put in a document. But what I think we'd really like to focus on are those specific Duluth asks, where we'll probably be providing supplemental handouts. I'm sure you remember the jazzy spreadsheets and charts that we created to explain the special education loss, and it was complicated. What
Yes.
we had was really complicated, but I can tell you that the time and effort we spent at the legislature, representatives from the district who came down for legislative days, the work of our government relations team, having those moments where after even just having a 10 to 15 minute meeting, having somebody go, oh, I get it. We worked really hard to make it as straightforward as possible for people to understand, and I don't want to discount the fact that in that first year, we made it all the way to the final omnibus bill until everything fell apart and we had a special session. And to have something like that go that far forward for a single district issue just shared so much of the work that was done. So we've already laid a lot of foundation. Many of those legislators are still here. Jeff shared with me sad news to me that Representative Dabney, who chairs the House Education Committee, is retiring. He has been a strong advocate for Duluth and initiatives that we have, even though he doesn't directly represent us. And I think if there's a year that we want to try to get that level of support in our process, working it through those committees is really important. So just because you see this here and we sort of have our annual bifold with some pictures and our district statistics and enrollment and those type of things on there, we will want to provide more specific information to our legislators and then create a strategy, which would include members of the board and others to help us spread the word. In the past, the DFT, our teachers, other unions have also supported sending that messaging because it's important to the district. So I hope that was.
Absolutely.
I have to say that when I first looked over this list, I mean, it looks pretty generic. It looks like every other list I've ever seen, which screams nothing special to me. It's just what we want, and everybody will benefit from it. And my question is isn't there just like one ask for our district that we can include that's just about us, that makes people want to know? I don't want to go down there advertising for everybody else too, necessarily. I mean, it's more money and more things for education is good for the whole state. However, I can think of, mental health supports that we need and counselor ratios, and how can we maintain staff, with our decreasing enrollment due to the pandemic, and, our equity money is drying up, our education equity money, isn't as stable and is decreasing. There's all sorts of asks, like you referenced, that we can ask for, and so what is our need? Again, because we can all say, oh, we have that money now, we have the pandemic money now, the Rescue Act money, this money, that money, but that's gone. It's going to be gone. I want something that can be recurring past the pandemic, past that money, and benefit our students, because they need help, period.
If I could just add a little bit and then transition to Jeff. I think that much of this does mirror things that we've heard and seen in the past, and it also, the AMSD board meeting was on Friday, and they presented their legislative platform, and there are many parallels here. I do see some Duluth-specific asks here, but I think that one of the differences is that with the state budget surplus, there is real money on the table to potentially shift one of these, one or more of these things that we've been asking for a long period of time. So thinking too, in addition to what's the Duluth specific ask, how do we best join forces? And you talked about the work with the unions. How can we best join forces to ensure that maybe we can get a couple of Duluth specific asks, but also really maybe bring something across in a meaningful way related to changing special ed formula or combat or another area?
So, Member Oswald, I would say that specific to the Duluth district, these first two asks, while we are asking for some other districts as well with that sales tax exemption, those are real dollars that will be able to be reinvested into the Duluth project, and then recouping that special education fund dollars that the district spent from its reserves is a heavy lift. That one, and I should say that what we did at the end of 2020 was a heavy lift. Our legislators, Representative Murphy, Olson, Schultz, and Senator Simonson at the time, they came through in a big way with the legislation that provided the district the flexibility to sell historical central. And so I think it's important we know that we've come off of a session where we ask some big things of our legislators and they delivered in a big way. And so going back, we should also be, I don't want to say measured, but know that in particular our special education ask, which is millions of dollars, is another heavy lift. So I would say ask everybody to just keep that at the top of their minds. And Duluth has become really a sought-after voice with those committees in St. Paul because we're a big district, but we're not a metro Minneapolis, St. Paul, or suburb district. So they come to ask, what are the problems? Are they unique to a district like Duluth, or are they challenges that other districts are facing? The superintendent, Kathy, I can guarantee you that they would be called upon to testify to these committees this year, maybe not about any of these specific items, but in other areas where they want to know the challenges and experiences that the district in Duluth has had. So I'll wrap that up by also saying and talking a bit about the work that we do. So during the legislative session, I live in St. Paul, and last year was an anomaly of a year for everyone, and it was for the legislature too, because I was in St. Paul probably 4 or 5 times throughout the entire session, because everything was remote. This year, that's not going to be the case. This year, the Capitol building is open, the Senate is in person, and their Senate office building is open. The House is more hybrid. They'll be meeting in person on the floor and virtually. The committees will all be virtual. But House members are encouraged to meet with constituents and lobbyists and others in the Capitol building. So I'll be in St. Paul, and so will a lot of the other lobbyists and stakeholders that work with districts and with other educational stakeholders. We all work together and communicate, and when you look at what is happening with the state budget and with this surplus, it'll be important that we have, that there are people on the ground who are collaborating and having these discussions with lawmakers, because as you know, Kathy and I have had this conversation, and the superintendent, when we talk about programs that could benefit Duluth, I've asked that question. Are there pilot programs? Are there other things that we should be doing? And it always comes back to that general education formula and the flexibility that more dollars provided by the state through that, the flexibility that the districts have, and that is one of the best ways for the state to continue to invest in education. And so, with that being on here and it being a priority of everyone, I think we can probably have some success there in moving that message in St. Paul.
Absolutely, I agree wholeheartedly with you. I'm just one of always looking to add one more thing, because you know this is relatively the same thing I've seen for the last 3 or 4 years, and not a heavy lift is what I'm saying. Can't we include a small winnable thing that moves us forward? And that's more what I'm looking for, of just something that can say, hey, this improved our kids' education in our city. You know, knowing that any of these great, huge things would definitely be wonderful and impact education wholeheartedly. Well, maybe not the construction sales tax exemption, but that's about our families. That doesn't, you know, necessarily directly affect our kids directly, but I want something winnable and something little and something that we can say, look, you know, the state cares about our kids too, and if we can get the big wins, more power to us. But if we can't get anything, that's the thing that I dread the most.
I'll just add, my heart feels the same things. Just so that everybody knows, the compensatory revenue, there's going to be multiple asks about compensatory revenue and how that can be reviewed and looked at. And just to give everyone a perspective, in fiscal year 16, our school district received $8.39 million of compensatory revenue, and in fiscal year 22, we received $5.4 million. This, if there's a win for Duluth Public Schools to advocate and support for a retroactive pupil count or date versus, we've heard some ideas about not utilizing free and reduced lunch counts or using, you know, different types of things. to look at it for Duluth, which is a great point, because not necessarily every concept for compensatory revenue is going to benefit every district the same. And believe it or not, there are some school districts who are growing and are receiving more compensatory revenue. We're not all losing, but I remember when we were going to the legislature last year, collectively in the state, the state got to keep $70 million of compensatory revenue compared to the year before because there wasn't enough eligible student counts to distribute it on the same level as last year. So there's other ways that I think for us, of the things we're putting on and all of the different platforms that everyone's going to support and endorse, we may want to take a little time as Duluth Public Schools to say which one of the platform areas in compensatory is going to benefit us more, because some of those sliding fee options aren't necessarily going to be as lucrative as a reverse for that. And then also, Member Oswald reminded me that one of the other things that's happening to Duluth is a potential sustained loss of students due to our geographic makeup versus other districts who have recovered more students since the pandemic. And I did share with Jeff when he asked me for ideas similar to you, I threw out everything in the kitchen sink. And one of them was to raise the level of what they call declining enrollment revenue. And maybe it becomes more specific for specific school districts that also say have a matching loss of compensatory and a matching loss of enrollment students, that there's a temporary declining enrollment recovery money that's a one-time, because they're not going to build it into a formula because that's difficult. But if we could create something using our own statistics that could get us something where we could do a specific ask to get some of that additional recovery, because we are seeing lower pupils than what we had hoped at this point a year ago, and because we have had such a significant loss of compensatory revenue, that way we could replenish that. So I'm with you, and I think we have a little bit of time to kind of maybe develop some ideas, but I think from a general, how do we want to create a general document to represent Duluth Public Schools in something that we hand out, but then come forward with those specific acts that will have supplemental handouts and documents. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
I like it.
Yay!
Are we also getting more special ed students?
Thank you. So the number of evaluations have grown in the past 3 years in visiting with our special ed staff. We have seen a change in the special education funding formula since 2020. So this was pre the, what was the special word? The anomaly, is that what we used? No.
No, we used a different.
Outlier.
Outlier.
We were an outlier. This is our magic word in every meeting we had. And we have seen a little bit of a bump up in revenue, but our expenditures have grown exponentially because we are also seeing higher need coming into the district, because a student isn't a student when it comes to how much does a student cost to educate, especially in our special services area. So you are correct that we are seeing that, but just to keep in mind that cross subsidy, which is a revenue stream that the state calculates how much money do we receive in general education revenue, how much do they give us in special education reimbursement, keeping that in mind that that's not a qualitative per pupil amount, it's a partial reimbursement on the cost of special education, and they find that difference and they call that cross subsidy. And I believe if I shared with Jeff, is it 6% this year? They're giving us 6% of approximately, and 2 years ago it was 9 million, I think it actually dropped a little bit because we actually reduced some of our costs, but that's what they're giving us in aid, is 6% of that gap between. So asking for that freeze, but also what would be ideal is even more, but again, is it sustainable and fundable past that time? Does that help?
Well, right, you just said that decreasing enrollment, decreased content revenue,
Yep.
increased special ed costs
Yep.
are all make
Not
us
good.
unique.
Yep.
But I think I'm correct in that it's the federal government has really fallen down. Since they're supposed to fund, what, 40%, and they fund.
We're at 5 for
5%.
Duluth Public
And
Schools.
so is there any way that we can let our federal representatives know? I know that Stauber 2 years ago said he was all for this, although I guess I haven't seen a word about that from him. I know that Tina Smith and Coalition are in support of increasing that. I know that's not your particular job.
It is.
Yeah.
No, go talk to them.
If you recall, 2 years ago, we had Representative Stauber.
We met, yeah.
But we also sent a letter to the federal delegation from the district. I don't know if it was from the board or from the superintendent, but advocating that position. And it may well be a timely letter to send again and put it on the calendar to, if we need to, send it again next year or the year after. But it's especially probably pointed at a time when Washington is talking about significant spending bills, and there would be money for education. I don't know specifically where they were at with funding for special education in the most recent federal talks, but it's a timely letter to send, and I'd be happy to draft that
I think that would be
for your consideration.
helpful and appreciated.
So just one final thing for me is, as Kathy's talking, I'm thinking about this. This is, you all live in this world every day and every week, but school finance and the policy making around education is incredibly complicated. And so we are constantly having to try to educate legislators too, because most legislators don't live in this world. And even legislators who serve on the education committees, sometimes we're teaching them things and sharing information that they don't have. So just know that we're trying to work in partnership with our local legislators, who again have been wonderful partners for the district over these last several years. Both some of the legislators who are no longer there and some of them who are there now, they've been great advocates for the district and for public education. And I for one look forward to engaging with them again this session, trying to make some movement forward on a whole host of things that will hopefully benefit this district.
Our intention is to provide this draft as well to the rest of the board before next Tuesday's regular board meeting. It will be on the consent agenda under resolutions, but know that this is just that formal, what turns into the bifold, and then we'll continue to work on individual ideas and then bring those forward as we embark in the session and make sure that we have those pieces.
I hope you can make that clear in board
Yes.
board,
Yes,
so that I can understand that.
we will.
And if I could, I'd also like to thank Jeff, not only for his advocacy and support from the legislative perspective, but Mr. Anderson has been very helpful with us during the transition as Katie Kaufman, our communications person, has been out. He's been providing some additional supports, and so just since this is a public opportunity and you're here at the board, I just wanted to say thank you for all the work that you've done for the district over the past many years, and especially this month. Thank you.
It's fun to work on these projects.
He loves hanging out with me.
Absolutely.
Any other questions for Jeff? We just thank you so much, and I do too have to say that we are so fortunate to have someone who's so knowledgeable and connected at the legislature. I have experienced over my many years of the joy of going down to the Capitol. You'll know in my life that if I don't look at the rotunda every single time I go to the Capitol, I'll be disappointed because it's just an amazing place. But what the workings of the legislature don't happen usually in the halls of those large groups. It's what happens outside of those, and having those relationships and having that understanding the connections on who can write bills for us, and having research folks who can put that together. Both our special education legislation and our historic central legislation were complicated. They were not easy bills to write, and having that access and support was awesome, so thank you.
Thank you, and I would certainly let everyone know Duluth and St. Louis County Days this year is planned to be mostly in person in St. Paul, and depending on how things are going in the world, I certainly always advocate for board members and coming down. it's a wonderful opportunity at that reception to talk to legislators, not just from Duluth, but from around the state of Minnesota, and to have a presence there. So we'll see. Middle of March is a long way out, but hopefully some of you would be willing to make the trip down and have those conversations with our legislators.
Okay, thanks sorry we didn't start on time, but you were worth the wait.
Thank you very much.
Does someone have a master key? I locked out of our seats.
Could you leave it open because my keys are in mine?
Thank you, I'll
Yes,
bring
sir.
this back.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff, and let us know how we can help you, for sure. Gladly do that. All right, so now we move on to the departmental reports. So first up is HR with Director Sever. Did I say your name correctly?
You did.
Okay.
Thank you. You can see on the report a few staffing updates, primarily a lot of action in the non-certified side. But as you'll see down in the certified area, we do continue to post and hire for teachers. So there is a lot of movement. There's a lot of current openings and a lot of reposting for lack of applicants, which isn't uncommon in this environment right now. From my perspective, I completed the pay equity report, and you'll see that later on in the agenda. And then just an
Can I ask a process question? When it comes back to the pay equity report, come back to you for that one?
yes.
Okay.
And then I've just been meeting with principals in each of the buildings. I think I have 2 left to meet with since I started at the district, and just to get a better idea of how HR can support them and service their needs, and what are some of the issues that we can work through that makes the transition through the HR process and the hiring a little more smooth between the two. We're continuing to work on those process improvements. We did hire a new HR assistant that will help support the non-certified hiring process. And as a result of that, you'll see in the benefits update that with that new HR assistant, we have an HR assistant that was a hire just prior to me coming on in, I believe, October, who really supports the benefits team, but she hasn't really been able to do that without that additional support for the non-certified side. So we'll be working on that, getting her trained up, and then right now we are working on AC reporting and the benefits. That's our big piece right now. And then, as I mentioned, there's a lot of hiring and a lot of posting for paraprofessionals, maintenance, and clerical staff, especially. There's been a lot of rotation there.
Are you having more success since you've increased? Because we did vote on increase, or I don't know, we did increase some of the pay for some of these, correct?
We did. It's hard to say if that is the direct effect. We still have so many openings and so few applicants. So it hasn't really necessarily made a difference in that, but I also don't know if it's just this moment in time, because we can't really connect it one way or the other.
Thank you.
I don't know if you see me over here, so I'm kind of, is there a way that, you could inform us, maybe monthly about the approximate number of unfilled positions we have out there? Because I think the more that we can talk about that, the more advertising you can do, the more word of mouth we'll get, the more maybe press we might have about filling those jobs. And you know, especially, you know, being that everybody's fighting for every worker that they can find. So. And I get a slew of them in my email, so I know we got some.
I apologize for stepping out for a moment, but just on that note, this is one of our opportunities to be in front of the public. We have started daily meetings looking at staffing at each of our schools, an elementary meeting and a secondary meeting, just because of the crisis point that we are sometimes getting close to, and making sure that if we have crisis needs in a particular building, that we have an all-hands-on-deck approach of sending district office staff and administrators and others out to support sites if needed. So partly because of the vacancies and partly because of staffing shortages, but just making sure that we have the ability to safely run safe learning environments for our students. We'll share more at the board meeting next week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is a report from CFO Erickson on business services.
So, Simone will be going through her items that are in the consent agenda when we get to the consent agenda, but just wanted to just give a brief update, just general on where we are in our process during this school year. We are about the halfway point of our fiscal year, which means we're in a very exciting time, which is reviewing where we are from this current year and looking kind of at our budgets. And Simone and I are very excited to start doing some analysis of, you know, have we been meeting our targets from where we are? Are there things that have happened, things that have changed? And then also the beginning preparations for the fiscal year 23 budget process. So this is an area in which, you know, we sort of start putting our toes in the water, and then we really ramp up in the months of February, March, and April. And as we all know, depending on where the legislature goes, that can have a direct and important impact on how we continue to move forward as a school district. So just wanted to let folks know that piece. And then I did insert as much as I could while Jeff Anderson was here, but I had put as my education finance topic for the year for the upcoming legislative session, just wanting to just reinforce the concept of this surplus and thinking about it very similar to ESSER, and how we've already been hearing speculation in relation to putting more money on the formula or putting more money on different programs and initiatives. And one of the great challenges that we will find, and things that, you know, school finance nerds will think about, is, are those sustainable into the future? And do we create something that may be affordable through this surplus, but may not be affordable in a future year? If you remember, it wasn't that long ago that we had a $4.3 billion deficit projected, and all of a sudden we're $11 billion the other way to a very positive outlook right now. So while there's, I think, some excitement to look at trying to do some comprehensive changes, I do think and agree with Member Oswald in the thought of, if we can do one-time things where we can get access to one-time money, that sets us up for the highest level of success versus trying to reach out for those ongoing potential sustainable things, because our fear is that they just will not remain sustainable in future years, depending on where the world goes, where the economy goes. So just wanted to share that with folks, that as we continue to look at that, and we're all very fortunate as different district leaders to have access to different organizations and different platforms. And not that I don't appreciate all of the other work, especially by the School Board Association and the different, the best, nerdiest group of people are the School Business Managers Association, and they actually look at the nerdy finance stuff about legislation. And so there's some really important work being done on a lot of levels, but I just wanted to just share how important that is, that we really be thoughtful and kind of understand as things start playing out, because it's true that it's almost worse to have too much money than it is not enough money, because there's going to be a lot of battling. There's going to be $9 billion of requests for the $7 billion, just like when there's a $1 billion bonding bill, there's $7 billion worth of requests, and there's still going to be people that they're going to say no to. I mean, it feels like, how can you say no to anyone? There's so much money involved, but there's just some thoughtfulness there. So thanks for the opportunity to just give a little precursor to the session, and we very much look forward to advocating on behalf of Duluth. Yeah.
I guess this is much more of a legislative ask process. Like, it seems disconnected that, you know, I've been in many a meeting where we're like, we should ask that, we should figure that out. This would be a great legislative ask, and yet we sit here and we go, what was that? And do I remember that? And so, can you tell me, do we have some sort of regular meeting over like the year to quantify or define those kinds of asks, and how does that work? Because
Yeah.
I don't really see it, so I'm sure it's got to happen somewhere.
It does. Thank
Okay.
you for that. And I will say the addition of having Jeff Anderson and the costing group as being our government relations folks, they work for us year round. They're not just here during the legislative session. they help us all year round as we kind of consider all those discussion areas and topics. And what Jeff often does for us is he kind of feels out groups and organizations, legislators and others who we can either find like-minded reasons why there's an initiative that might benefit Duluth Public Schools, or a one-off that we want to potentially utilize. And we may often start with House or Senate research folks, because they're kind of the secret brains behind all of that, to see what's viable and not viable. So we do a lot of that work to find out, is it worth, and I know you've probably been a part of different processes, but sometimes we'll put something together and a legislator will just say, not this year, don't waste your time. I think I shared before that years ago in a previous position, I was strongly advocating for a compensatory revenue change for our Iron Range school districts because of unemployment shifts and how compensatory was calculated. I made the jazziest spreadsheet, you guys, it was awesome. And showed how a potential language change would really benefit not just us, but other districts. What I hadn't thought about and didn't consider was that it didn't help Minneapolis or St. Paul. And I couldn't figure out a way to make it help. And when it got to a committee level, Senator Tomasoni was kind enough to give me a hearing so I could talk, and he just said, this isn't going anywhere, right? He goes, I believe in you, and I believe we want to make a voice, but we couldn't, there was just no way without figuring out how other people were going to benefit from it, that it wasn't going to make it anywhere past getting included in a bill. So we do work with Jeff, we work with Gary Starkvenick, his colleague, and our regional delegation, just to get the flavor for, where is that going to move forward. So I'm always bouncing stuff off of Jeff to say, like compensatory or others, and he will then bounce that off of legislators or House research folks. Tim Strum is an amazing person. And so does that help answer your question? So we are working on those things and trying to figure out, and then if it has, like the special education piece, we worked it internally to see if we had a shot at it, and then we brought it back to the board and said, okay, we think we can put something together out there where we can actually put legislation. If we couldn't figure out a way to do it, we would, and it did change. Like, again, when I started, I had an idea in my head how I thought we deserved even more money. But we got to a point where it was a fair thing, and we spent a ton of time with the Department of Education. We spent a lot of time with House research and Senate research. So I hope that we do that work, and then when it percolates up to getting a chance at it, that's how we have worked together.
Well, that's a great broad view. I was just wondering, like, in the House, like, do we have a secret list of wants and asks? Like somewhere, that sort of thing.
Jeff does carry an ongoing list of items, and all the way from the year they started here, which was 4 years ago now, I think. And we always do a review each year of the things that came up even 4 years ago. Are they something viable now? Like we pivoted with Historic Central, when that kind of came up rather quickly, we wanted to move that forward, and so we kind of backburnered other potential things to see if we could get our resources behind that.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so next is the enrollment report.
Member Oswald and Member Eater are new this year, but Dr. Kirby got to hear this all of last year too. My message will be very similar to our months in the past. There's 2 reports that Kateri Little has provided for you as attachments in the board book and in our report. And again, we continue, and again, I do want to say that it may appear as if we're seeing a slight growth as we look at the month on its own, but this is the peak and everything starts to fall from here. So as we continue to look at where we're going to be coming forward, we are projecting that we'll be around 8,000 or just shy of 8,000, and we talked about that last month. Due to some changes in our world and changes in my specific department, we did not have a specific ask this month to do a budget change, but we'll be bringing that forward in February to do a revision. what that means is we're gonna recommend that the 8180 pupil units that we had the board adopt back in June, we think is now too high. And we're gonna ask for the board to consider a lower pupil count, which will change our revenue projection. And then we're looking at then from an expenditure side that we have allocated ESSER funds to help offset that balance. So that will just mean some of our ESSER dollars, which the board did approve back in June, will counteract the fact that we think we're gonna have a little bit less general fund revenue because we are gonna do, now, could things perk up in the next 6 months? I don't know, history is telling me no. History tells me that we start to see a decline in pupil counts for all the reasons we talk about, including early graduation, options for other opportunities for students. So that is a challenge for us, but we will be bringing that forward for an adjustment.
In June?
Next month.
Next month, okay, I missed that one.
Yep. So I'll pause if anyone has any questions. Just a reminder that those columns talk about the number of enrollments. So it looks like we've had 12,000 different enrollment records. Of those, we've had 9,300 unique students enter or leave our district since the beginning of the school year. And we're currently having head counts of about 8,400.
Does that number include absenteeism, or
It
is it
does.
just enrollment? And,
Yep.
and so we're, just by looking at that, can you just generally say that there's 900 students absent a day kind of thing, or?
No, so
How does that work?
Yep, so the 8,400 is, the 93 is at any one time during the year, 9,300 kids have either started here, but then many of them just left here. So a lot of those might be our residential students who come in for 30 days, 60 days. So what Cattery just tries to show you is that the district has processed 9,300 records, but at this current date, at the end of, this would have been the end of December, we had 8,400 students enrolled throughout the district. As a head count, that's not our revenue base, that's just a head count.
Okay.
And then once you look at their valuation and what they're gonna turn into, and that's that ADM, that's where it drops all the way down to that 83, but we'll be projecting just shy of 8,000 this year. Make sense? And I will just say that if you ever wanna just talk about people counts outside of this meeting, you can call me and I'd love to talk about it.
Is there any like early childhood pre-K stuff that we can make an enrollment push for a second semester kind of thing, like programming out there to help counteract the loss in the later grade?
So that's a great question, and I would probably want to defer to Sherry Williams for her to spend a little bit more time on the uniqueness and complexities of our early learners. Early learning, generally speaking, is an area where we may see some growth, but then not all of those students percolate here and stay here because not all of our other entities in Duluth provide an early learning option. So while it can be a temporary up in that certain area, we don't always see them stay with the district going forward. And I will say, if you look through our community education and our early learning services, they do a great job of marketing to our families and making sure that they do great outreach to our families. One thing we are seeing, and we continue to see, obviously last year was one of the big things we did see was families not enrolling their students for kindergarten. So we did see just parents choosing to keep kids out of school for a year. So we're maybe gonna start seeing that bubble as students start coming back. So we're kind of waiting to see what's gonna happen there. But overall, in our early learning and early intervening, remembering that we have voluntary pre-K, we have the Head Start program, which focuses on those higher, lower income, higher poverty based students, and then we have the sliding fee school readiness programming. So those are buildings and areas that don't qualify for that voluntary pre-K because that's also income based where those can be, and then we provide that in some of our other schools. So we have 3 different pots of early learning, but they're all programmed under our preschool services.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, we'll move on to the child nutrition report.
very grateful for Sheila Oak and her team, and each month she just provides us some statistical information so the board and those that are following along can see our meals and food production activity. She also shares our current job openings so that folks know that we do have some areas within our district that we could continue to use support. And then again, the food supply chain issues we've been sharing every month. That is a continued challenge for us that we're not always able to get the things we've ordered through our bidding process, and that's just because the wholesale suppliers are not able to get those things. So as Sheila had shared a few months ago, we've had to change some of our lunch calendars to help do that. So
I know, I've heard about it.
in a good way or bad way?
Just a matter of fact.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I know that I think at one time we were able to give more pizza, so we thought maybe that was a good thing when some of the other things were coming. But if you've been really waiting for chicken tenders, it's probably not been a great time.
Yeah, I have heard about that. Great. Any questions? Member Oswald?
I'm sorry if I'm talking too much. How are we covering with the food service jobs?
Yep.
And with all the vacancies that you
Yep,
see here?
so we have been just like since the beginning of actually since before the pandemic, we've seen general openings in our food service areas for a few years. We do a lot of shuffling. This year and last year, due to the free lunch through USDA, we have not been doing the a la carte lines where formerly we would have had more helpers doing that work. So while ideally the more helpers we have, the more lines and the more quickly we could serve, we just have less lines, so it just takes a little bit longer. So, and we've been having great cooperation where on certain days, if we have people out, they'll switch from one site to another to help sites. We're pretty bare bones in our food service area. They are a very efficient ship. Sheila Oak and the site-based managers do a great job based on what they can do, but that's basically, we've been doing a lot of shuffling. We only had, I think, one time where we had a closure because we didn't have enough staff. And in those events, we do pull lunches from another site and transport them over to that building for the day. And I think it was just a required COVID closure at the time because of an exposure, and so we couldn't have the kitchen open. So then we just have meals, and our facilities team was kind enough to get those from Denfeld and bring them over to the east end. But that's been an anomaly. So we continue to just shuffle a lot of people and ask people to do a lot of work.
It must be a really good job because I haven't heard a lot of complaints from parents that normally there's always some school that complains that, you know, their kid doesn't get enough time to eat and, you know, they're getting 5 minutes because they got their lunch late and that kind of stuff. So I'm glad it seems to be, people are flexible, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, we'll be honest, we've had feedback. There's been days that haven't been ideal, but I think the understanding of where we are has really helped, and I think people understand that we are doing the best we can with the circumstances we have.
Any other questions? Great, let's move on to our facilities department report.
Sure, I can do that. Member Kelly Durk either. Lost my train of thought there for a second. The facilities management capital status report for December 2021. In the past month, we have completed 64 work orders and are currently working on 183 open work orders. And the next bullet is what I call training of snow removal contractors, and it's, even though it's the same contractors, it's an annual start of winter task that even though these contractors clear snow every year for us, it's typically the same contractors. They do it wrong at the beginning of the year, put snow on sidewalks, snow where crosswalks are, handicap parking spots. It takes a month to get that straightened out, but we're working hard on that. And our utility crews have been very busy with snow removal tasks district-wide over the past few weeks. Next bullet point is administrative staff. From what I've heard, and I would tend to agree, we've all settled into this building really well, and people seem to be happy from what I've been hearing. So I think everything is working out well here. Under capital construction, work is ongoing in the existing facilities building, and that was the building that is staying. A lot of work has been done, the demo is completed, renovations are currently beginning. The print shop was moved there initially. During the move, their area was completed, and they're in the renovated space, and they really like it, and they're doing well. We still have probably one more meeting that we need to have, 1 to 2 more meetings on the PSS track. And we're proposing times, and CFO Erickson and I are working with our attorney on that. For the on-the-hill construction tasks and master plan, we have multiple meetings every week, and they're being conducted on all aspects of this project, and much progress has been made. In our building operations staff have been performing an excellent job of keeping our sites safe for staff and students. We do have ongoing vacancies in the custodial ranks that we are working to fill under health and safety and environmental management. All the remaining hazardous waste, and there was a lot in historical central, we've properly disposed of that. The emergency response team met this past month. The base station for this building, UHG, has been installed and is operational. Lester Park had a fire marshal inspection and passed that. We did make repairs to the Lincoln Park identical bleachers and gym equipment. And then Matt indicated that a notable item, we did have a COVID case that would be considered an OSHA reportable injury. And OSHA reportable cases are submitted to OSHA in the year-end summary for the purpose of logging the incident data. And OSHA reportable cases, or OSHA COVID reportable cases, are determined based on a different standard than workman's compensation claims. For the purpose of an OSHA recording, we record COVID cases on our OSHA log if it is a lab-confirmed case and the worker had a recent exposure to a confirmed COVID positive individual while working. So it's really strict, or really loose criteria, but it does not, fit in the workman's comp criteria. There's 2 different animals, so it was not work comp, but it was OSHA. And then the numbers for December of 2021 are indicated below, and the year-to-date 2021 are also indicated. And I'll open it up for questions if anybody has any.
Hoping someone is Trigger right now to ask an awesome question of Dave, because she did it every single meeting for 4 years. I should have called her. I know. Right?
Just one quick question, more for sake of the group that I know the answer to already. Where are we on the finalization of the sale of Historical Central?
Is located
Or what could be
Yeah.
shared?
Yeah, so if we could just
Hold
hold
off.
on that, thank you.
I guess I could ask, are we still responsible for shoveling out Old Central, Historic Old Central at this point? Is that still on our insurance policy, kind of? Like if somebody calls and there's some calls there?
Everything is operational, it's insured, it's staffed, it's maintained, and it will be until we close.
Okay. And that will be a future discussion. I got
Be at a
that.
future date.
Are there any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Spooner.
Thank you.
Now we're on Technology Department report.
Thank you. I want to start off with the cybersecurity. Once again, our cybersecurity for Gmail, we accepted 941,000 emails. We rejected 63,000 emails. 57,000 were identified as spam. 3.1 were identified as phishing. None of them were identified as malware. We just sent out an email again reminding staff about the normal one, because there's a lot of staff that sent it out in November. We just sent it out once again because we get a lot of tickets and a lot of people saying, hey, I'm in this dark, I never signed up for it. It's just a friendly reminder to those emails, because they are phishing emails. We had 17 cooler docks that were blocked for sharing because they had high severity incident of their social security or credit card numbers on them. So that gets automatically blocked in our domain. The next one was our E-rate bids. Since last month, we've opened up the bid for our bid 1296, our wireless. We received 3 bids. 2 of them were complete. One was not a complete bid. It was going through it and use the rubric we have for scoring those bids, and we'll be doing this to the February 2020 school board for review and approval. The estimated value is $750,000. That's a low bid. The other one is $1 million. The technology help desk tickets in December, we had 289 technology new tickets created. 349 tickets were resolved. 510 were remaining. Our time went up to 184. It was 176 last month, and that is due from communication.
Can you repeat that $700,000 item? I just missed what it's for.
It's for wireless infrastructure. Replace all the wireless access points district-wide.
Is something the project is happening this year? Or
It'll be next year, the next school funding year. So we'll realize if we receive the rate, hopefully after July 1st, and then we'll.
so we're asking for that half, and we have to do that.
Roughly, yeah. It's 40%. Yep. For projects, we're still working with CDWG for a Live and Learn 1-1 initiative. I have working to schedule in our wireless validation site survey, but I'm thinking we're going to push that off till later due to the COVID and all this stuff going on right now. I think that's just a safe thing to do. We have CDWG services to help with our cybersecurity. Those are some of the following things that they're helping us with. We did receive all of the playbooks. We just have to finalize those and actually update them with people responsible for those. And we did land a spot for have the site team come in to help us out, which will be the Doherty lab. He was kind enough to allow us to use one of the labs there. Program moves. This next week, we'll be moving stuff out of POTS, all of our infrastructure out of POTS. So that's all of our network gear and their switches and stuff like that. I was hoping to have Garfield up by this meeting, but it should be this week. They do have wireless services, but they do not have our networking services there. And on the 24th, Spectrum's going to be moving the services from Ox to the Tech Village for the AEO. So we're hoping that by the end of the month, the Tech Village will be up on our network. That ends my December report. Anybody has any questions?
Member Oswald?
You're gonna all hate me for making meetings long. I just have a couple of questions. The new wireless access points, are they gonna support more devices or more gigs or more, why do we need them?
The ones we have right now, their end of life is April of 2023, so they're no longer supported. So we are planning to get the bids in place on that date. So that's why we went off bid. Now we have to, people get this quite early to leverage that E-rate money. So we have until June of 2023 to purchase them. So we're going to probably be buying them.
There's no supply chain issues then, too.
We don't anticipate any, but we'll have a long lead time to get these in.
And who's getting the new desktops, and why are we getting desktops? Why?
So the new desktops, we ordered 400 of the new desktops, and 110 of those are going to be attached to the new smart boards that are going with that. And then we probably have close to 1,000 desktops that are 10 years old that should be replaced. So,
That's why I asked who gets them, because
Right.
that wasn't enough.
Right, yeah, and I know Yeah, the teachers in K through 2 are getting, they're looking at smart boards, so they're gonna get a new desktop to run that in their system. We also, part of that 400 or 600 desktops is Fab Labs, the graphic arts lab. We also have new desktops for all of our principals to support the new video security system we put in. The entire computers with graphic cards. And that would actually spill into people in facilities and then that also have access to our video security systems.
And can you just go over like help desk tickets? You know, I see these numbers, but what's good? You know, like is 184 hours of average resolution time a good time, or is it not?
I don't feel that's a good time. I know we went up by 10 hours average, but our staff we have going out to the buildings visit the buildings once a week for 4 hours. So they're already 7 days, so that's 170 some hours. If they don't get the address the ticket in that one visit, so that's, I would like to see it a lot less than that. And we actually did post a position which closed earlier this month for another field support person that hopefully will help these numbers.
And you had applicants?
I don't know yet. I haven't heard yet.
Someone might know.
So, yeah. So, we're hoping.
We're all waiting. No, I'm just kidding. And so, I mean, are these like average number of tickets that, you know, help desk tickets? Is it what you normally see?
No, at this time, usually post COVID pandemic, we would be at 200 tickets.
Oh, okay.
So we're at 2.5 times of what we normally have. So we have a lot of these tickets are related to building repairs. A lot of their tickets are related to blended learning. So we have a lot more support needs because of.
And thus we need somebody hired. Yeah. Hopefully they apply. So, thank you for that.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. Let's move on to transportation.
The monthly transportation report from Steve Johnson just shares just a general overview of just a reminder that we are about 1/3 district fleet, 2/3 Voyager bus contracted fleet. Our transportation, we have been having some conversations about Versatrans. That's our software system related to that, and we're going to have some discussions. There's some updates that we need to do on that, and Bart, I know, I think we've had some conversation internally, but we'll have some discussions on making sure that we can continue to work on that. An important thing for the district would be for Versatrans, the bus system, to better interact with Infinite Campus, our student system, because so much of that information, so there's some things we can do there, and I know that's one of Steve's priorities that we want to work on. Nothing new on the continuous shortage of bus drivers, but again, we want to celebrate that we have not yet had to implement our route shortage implementation plan that was created just before Thanksgiving. I did actually receive a message from Voyager that they have had a lot of test kits going out to their staff members, so the holidays, we're seeing that same trend. They are okay for now, but just wanted to give us that indication that, again, there's just that surge that we were hearing about, and I think is being affirmed there, so we continue to be vigilant about that. Steve and I talked briefly this morning. We did have a special education bus that had an engine issue, and it was an older bus that maybe ideally we would have replaced, but the lead time to get a school bus right now is so long that in order for us to have that functioning special education bus, we needed to repair the engine. And I'm happy to report that it has officially been repaired. We were delayed because there's actually less people who are able to work on school buses right now too. So we were able to do that, and I believe Simone maybe got an email today saying, how do I pay for that? Yeah, so I do want to share that, you know, one of the areas, and not our district has a mask policy district-wide, but that federal requirement of all people wearing masks on our school buses. is a lot for our drivers, knowing that some of our all-age learners don't especially appreciate masks and having to wear them, and without having the same level of supervision and people who can help monitor those kids, that can be a daily challenge. So if you see a bus driver, thank them for what they're doing, because I know that some of them have challenging days. And then just wanting to let folks know that we are continuing to do cleaning and protocols on our school buses. Even though we know a lot has changed, we continue to do routine maintenance, and just appreciating that Steve has been very creative on our bus purchasing budget allocations, where he has purchased moderately used buses to leverage more money versus the going rate of a school bus now. I think we're like in the 120s now for just the body and the chassis and all the different things you have to purchase. And so he's been doing a great job of, and he shares it every month, the lowering of our average mileage, because when he got here, it was really high. And so he's been doing a great job to try to lower that average. So thanks for letting us share that report.
I see that we lost a mechanic, is that, or the lead mechanic, is that?
Yes,
Okay.
but we are hopefully going to be replacing that soon.
The new administrative assistant doesn't have to cover that.
Well, now that you mentioned it.
Are there any questions?
I just have a question about the 25 scheduled field trips for January. Are those still happening because of our adjustments that we are probably going to be making in COVID?
So the overnight field trips are something that are on hold, so that may cause that number to fluctuate, but we still, with proper safety protocol, we still are offering and allowing for some during the day field trips.
And so 25, some of them may be overnight or not? Okay.
So now we move on to the consent agenda. And so the first is the HR staffing report. Do I say anything about this, or is this? Okay, good.
This is normally if anyone has any questions.
Okay, personal, okay.
Yep, this one is usually, yep.
Okay. Are there any questions?
Come on, Member Oswald, you know you got one.
I didn't get as far as the consent agenda in my preparation, I'm sorry.
Great. Then we have finances. There's two reports on finance, a financial report for the July 1 to June 30th, 2022, and then fundraisers, and this was for Lester Park. This was students doing chores at home to raise money for small trees and gifts, and then delivering them to the residents at nursing homes.
As a reminder, we have to have all fundraisers approved by the board, so that's how they run through this. That's why we do keep track of those. So, and as a reminder, sometimes you'll see that it seems like nothing's happening, but these come through each building, and the clerical submits these through an intranet form. And sometimes with everything being so busy, they may come later. So you might see a whole bunch one month, and then we see some lows and catch up. So very common for us to have that happen.
And then have these already gone through, so we're just approving?
Yes.
Okay.
And where would GoFundMe's show up? Would that show up in fundraisers or
Yes.
donations?
Yep, GoFundMe's are a form of fundraising, but we do have a internal protocol now for the process to go. And again, we are very supportive of Donors Choose because of the lack of fees associated with that, but we do have folks that are using like a GoFundMe. We have a policy. We will acknowledge that I think that some individuals may be doing those, but doing them under themselves. So keeping in mind that if they're representing the district, they should be doing it under a district fundraising policy, but sometimes different groups and organizations do GoFundMe's as an outside, and then they would come through as donations through the donation process.
And then next, I see this resolution or acceptance of donations. This is still underneath fundraisers, is that correct, Steve Clarkson?
Nope, you'll see the acceptance of donations under resolutions.
Oh, there it is, okay, so I jumped all the way down. So bids, RFP, and quotes, we don't have any. Contracts, change orders, leases, we don't have any there.
And just a reminder, we keep a placeholder on both of those because sometimes even between this meeting and the school board meeting, we may have something that comes up and we'll always reach out to you as the chair to let you know that something has come in between. But we do put those there because on occasion, it doesn't happen often, but on occasion, we may have something that comes through that would need to be approved by the board.
Okay.
Did we skip you?
No, we're fine. I mean, we did, but
Oh.
I opened it, and if anyone had any questions,
What
they
did
can
I
ask.
s- what did I
Just
miss?
Just on the monthly budget report.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's self-explanatory.
I'm sorry. No,
Okay.
but you should share the great things you've added at the moment.
Okay. So, if you're looking at your budget summary, that is self-explanatory. It tells you by fund and what our revised budget, what we've spent, what we're encumbered, and where we are, we have leftover, revenues and expenses. Down below, I have little notes here for you. So ESSER 2, which is Finance 155, we've spent a little over $3 million so far, and I will give you that updated number every month. And towards the middle is Fund 6, which is our building construction projects. And we've spent a little over $1.8 million. And I've broken it down by course code so you can see professional service, my glasses, owner payments. Those are the people that actually are running the project, so we make administrative costs to them. Design, construction management, commission, and interior costs. So I kind of put that, I just pulled that out of that summary from above, so you can kind of see where we're landing there. And then towards the right is our Fund 1 student activity, what we're bringing in revenue and our expenses. We're going to be starting the process of bringing in more funds there with closing out bank accounts. I started that process.
Are there any questions? Thank you, I appreciate the addition of those little tabs down there. And just throw something at me if I miss something.
No
Okay.
problem, thank you.
All right, okay. So now we are under resolutions. So the first resolution is the acceptance of donations by the Duluth Public Schools, and just take a couple minutes to look through. We have a lot of mittens that were given to our schools, Condon, Lester Park, Lowell, it looks like, and Piedmont. Thank you for those. And then Denfeld for girls basketball, girls softball, some donations for Head Start. Lincoln Park got a donation for their music department, Go Lincoln Park. And I believe that is everything. Is there any questions or anything we have to discuss for this?
Similarly, we may see groups of donations come in per month, and so just because you don't see a site in here doesn't mean that they might not have received a donation. It may be that it shows up next month, so just wanting folks to know that it's very cyclical.
And then the second item under resolutions is the legislative platform, and that attachment is pending, but we got that today, I'm assuming.
Yes, so that, I did
Okay.
talk to Patty, and she's gonna upload that for us. So the document that we shared today will be what uploads, and then the resolution is actually just a very simple one-sentence resolution.
All right, we're to that. And then placeholder, we're good there. All right, and then just cruising right along to the pay equity report from Director Sever.
And just a point, this is going to need board approval, so I'm not sure why it's under.
So should it be under resolution?
So what happens for
Okay.
us is that by approving the report, the pay equity report gets approved. So it doesn't need a specific resolution. So all of our reports that run through here will be considered approved through the approval of the report.
Okay, so we don't have to worry about this pay equity report in terms of the consent agenda, it's coming through this committee that
Correct.
is board approval?
Yep.
Okay. So then we should maybe, for the HR finance report on Tuesday, maybe have a little discussion about how we present this. right?
Yep.
Okay. Great.
So, a couple things to note, this compliance report was actually due January 31st of 2021. So we're out of compliance. But I was able to get it completed, and they're usually pretty gracious if you can do it within the year it was due with extenuating circumstances. Obviously, we had some shifts in leadership in HR, so they were fine with that. We didn't make any naughty lists. So the first piece you'll see is the compliance report, and happy to say that we are in compliance for all the components that they look to. And then the second piece that's attached there is really just the data that goes into the report, which might be a little bit more explanatory to go through. So if you pull that one up, you'll see that the predicted pay report, one page.
Yep.
There should be a list attached.
So we'll just make sure that gets
Yep,
correctly
and
attached.
basically what it is that should have been attached to that predicted pay report is all the jobs that the district has and somebody currently serving in the position, the minimum pay and the maximum pay, and how many females and how many males. So the pay equity report from Minnesota, the compliance piece is that we are not underpaying females in comparison to jobs that are similarly rated to male dominated jobs.
Do they look at it, do they have the reverse, so overpaying males?
No. So from a process perspective, I enter all of that salary data for every classification that we have in the organization. Then the state has some magical stuff behind the scenes that actually creates the statistical analysis and plugs all these numbers in based on the data that I have submitted, which gets you to that predicted pay second piece.
So, just because I'm looking at this, I don't quite understand it. So on the y-axis, we have salary, and I'm assuming, and then on the x-axis, it's points.
Right, so every job has to be rated on a system so that it's comparative to each other. And that is the banding and grading that we may have not had that conversation in any of the larger board meetings, but we have a system that we use that we send all of our job descriptions out to be banded and graded. And then they provide us with a number that helps us to place them in a salary schedule.
Yeah.
And that number is what is entered into this system. So that
On the y-axis for the salary, or like, what's the point?
the points is the rating scale that comes back from our banding and grading.
So what does 0 points mean versus 40 points?
So
Like when you move out on this axis, what does that tell you?
it means that the job is higher points means it has more responsibility, it should then garner higher value.
Got it. Okay. So as you move out, you're talking about moving up the structure?
Yes.
Okay. That makes sense. Thank you for that. So bottom line is that we are in compliance?
You're in compliance.
And then so we have to start this all over again for
It's a 3-year report.
3-year report. Okay.
So we don't have to do it for a while.
Okay. Good, because it took us a while to get it. All right. Any questions? All right. Moving on to, we've tabled the district property updates for different.
I think what ended up happening was the Greg Palmer report inadvertently got under facilities. So
Correct.
there's 2 items under, if you scroll up to facilities, the monthly Greg Palmer, and this is just his,
Okay.
it's just a very high level overview of what we're working on right now. So basically, we have 2 properties in our district that are under contract, and he's just sharing
here
that,
we go.
and that's what it says.
Okay. So we don't need to talk about it.
Yep, and
Okay.
I'll have that moved for the final meeting to pull that out of facilities and move it down to.
Perfect. All right, next, excuse me, we have expenditure contracts.
So, just a quick update,
Kathy, can you explain to me what an expenditure contract is?
I can. So we have 3 types of contracts that we delineate every month. We have an expenditure contract, which means that costs the district money. So we're expending money in order to make an agreement with someone. Then we have what we call a no-cost contract, which means that we're making an agreement with someone for most likely in-kind services where it's not actually costing us any money, but we want something, both parties want something in writing to understand the agreements. And then we actually, on occasion, have a revenue contract where someone is giving us money, and oftentimes, like the latest example would be adult basic education. We'll receive money to provide services to other organizations or other services that work with our adult basic education. So in our expenditure contracts, looking through that process, these would be the contracts that are under $100,000 that the business services, as CFO, myself, or the superintendent can sign off. So we're sharing this with you as informational as we move forward through the process. And then just as a reminder, as you read through the expenditure, when you see the amount and an asterisk, if there's an asterisk, that means it's an up to clause. It doesn't necessarily mean the contract is going to be paid in full at that amount, but it has a limit or a ceiling for up to and a certain amount. So oftentimes, for example, if you see the two American Indian education folks that are going to be providing some workshops and storytelling and music, we do an up to clause for so much an hour for so many hours. They may not provide all those services, but there is a contract that says we would expend, and our accounts payable team would know that we would not expend any more than those amounts. Sometimes you'll see here where we'll do amendments to contracts because something will happen where we need to expend more than the original contract, and we'll ask for an amendment to an original contract. So these would be generic, regular items that are under $100,000 that we're moving forward with and recommending as just informational that these have been approved.
Are there any questions?
Member Oswald?
I see the second item of we're renting office space at Lake Superior College. ALC is doing that.
Yep.
What?
So, yep. So as part of their work and part of their planning for what they're calling their phase 2 process of where we're going to go after our temporary time through our transition, Lake Superior College has indicated that they were willing to provide some small space to provide a basically a remote or out of the tech village area for staff and students to meet up, to be able to do things like credit recovery or catch up with a student. It was a relatively minimal amount of money for a 3-year monthly grant, I think about $125 a month. And working with ALC and AEO and knowing what they had in their budget and knowing that we were seeing some higher end needs, that would be available year round for us. So having that conversation with Nathan Globally, this was his recommendation. It had great conversation with both Assistant Superintendent Bonds and Superintendent Magus, in that due to the college's willingness to give us such a low amount, basically just to cover the space cost to take care of it, this was something that Principal Globally had recommended.
Is this something that is going to continue beyond the 3-year agreement, or be part of phase 2, or
Hard to
whatever?
Yeah,
but we just figured
don't know.
$100 a month for space
Oh,
at
absolutely.
the,
I'm not.
at the
that's-
college, so.
If they need this space within that 3-year time, are they allowed to take it away from us?
There's out clauses for both the district and Lake Superior College.
Will be invaluable to them.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for that question, Member Oswald. I was wondering the same thing. Any other questions? Great, okay, now we'll move on to the no-cost contracts, and what do we see under there?
This was just the agreement. We had some COVID testing during our break, and one of the churches that was secured to provide that just asked us if we would put in writing that we were using it. They just wanted it for their insurance and other things, and so they didn't ask us to pay any money, but they just wanted an agreement in hand. So this is a perfect example of a no-cost contract. The other location did not request that, but this was a request from the church.
Yeah, and this church.
The other location was the Lutheran Church of the Good Shepherd on the east side. They just didn't need that particular piece, but since they were both very gracious in offering their spaces, I just wanted to mention them as well.
That's awesome, and this is for Ashbury United Methodist
Yes.
Church? Okay, so we had Ashbury United Methodist on the west side of town, and then what was the church?
Lutheran Church of the Good Shepherd.
Lutheran Church of the Good Shepherd on the east side of town. Thank you to both those churches. Now the revenue contracts. We have three, and here we have the two for Duluth Adult Education. So SOAR and Career Solutions provides us dollars, and then we provide services through that process. And then we have a 5-year monitoring site lease with the MPCA on the roof of Laura MacArthur, so they pay us so that they can have a piece of equipment on the roof of Laura MacArthur. We love this.
We have more roofs. Do they have more need?
No, that's about the only need they have, and we've been offering up our roads for 25 years.
Okay.
Perfect, so we have no grant application, no change order signed, we have nothing to refer to the policy committee. So, did we make it through? We did! Yay!
Congratulations.
Yay!
Good job, Doug.
So what will happen, just as a formality, after this meeting, I'll be providing information to, and even though she's officially not here, she's on vacation, so Jackie Dolans is helping us with the transition of this meeting. You'll see another version of this business services meeting as the final that goes to the board. So in the event that there's ever a change, or somebody wants to change a resolution, or there's something else that pops up that we needed to add, you'll have that version. So we always keep the original committee version at its level, and then we have that other version that'll say board. So you'll see that come up, and that'll get posted by Friday for the regular school board meeting next Tuesday. And then again, should we have any things that come up between now and then, we'll provide information to the committee chair and let her know that, so in your report, if there's an additional placeholder that needed to be added, that could be brought up for discussion. Perfect. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for your leadership.
I'll have those paid.